I remember meeting the producer at the studio on my first job, and he took me into his office and he said, "Brad, every day you can pick one scene to make look really good. Beyond that, just make your day."
Do you think if you were still moving to Los Angeles today, that it would take you 5 to 10 years to find steady work as a cinematographer?
It's hard to say, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. The reasons being are that there are tools today that didn't exist in 1990. You have the internet, you have film industry groups and associations, you have access. Like when I started shooting, the only way to shoot quality work was film cameras, which were very expensive and very hard to come by. And the film was expensive, and the processing and the telecine. And if you shot on video, it looked cheap and crappy. But even those cameras were expensive. There were no inexpensive home camcorders. And so it's, I can shoot something on my iPhone and you could cut it into an Avengers movie and you would never know. That is just an incredible paradigm shift. You can cut films on your phone, you can cut them on your computer. Those things did not exist. Now you've got YouTube and influencers and web shows and so many more things. Now, how long it would take me to crack in, to the more professional stuff like, feature films, it's hard to say, but it would be a lot easier to make quality content. It would be a lot easier to access other filmmakers. Back in the 90s, how do you find anybody? Now you just pop on Facebook and you jump in a group and boom, there you go. You're surrounded by them. And if that group is full of a bunch of shitty people with bad attitudes, you just go to the next group. You go to multiple groups. It's a very different world. So I think maybe not. I think it would have happened faster. Whether the big stuff would have happened faster or not, I don't know. But I would have been up and running, making films faster, almost for sure.
And just as a side note, you said you were crashing on a friend's couch or floor.
I was on a floor on a little foam egg crate. The little mattress toppers. And not only that, but I continued to sleep on that for about a year, even when I got my own place. I had a one bedroom at Vermont and the 101 in Koreatown. And it was literally a one bedroom, and there was 3 of us, and at times more, because we were kind of the underground railroad for Houston. When people would come out, I'd be like, "Come on out," and I paid forward my friend's offer, where she said, you can come out and stay for free for a month, and that was kind of my policy: is you can come out, you stay for free for a month, give you time to find a job and a place, and get in a place where you're comfortable and secure. And I think, we helped some people, get their starts that way. I'm very proud of that.
What's the strangest part-time job you had unrelated to film during that time?
During that time? Probably, there was some job that I only vaguely remember, but this guy would pay me to go and audio tape like school plays or musicals on a little cassette recorder. In retrospect, I'm just like, what was that all about? I don't even really remember it, but it happened. So yeah, that was the strangest thing, really.
Interesting. Where'd you find that job?
I don't even remember much about the job. I have no idea where I found that.
What did Roger Corman teach you about the business of filmmaking?
Well, Roger Corman personally and directly taught me nothing, because I never worked with Roger. I met Roger, and he's a really nice guy, and he's like a big kid. He was so excited about this cheesy monster that somebody had repurposed, very affordably. I think he was more excited that, they had repurposed it for next to nothing than, what they had actually produced with it. But, he had a very I'm sure he still does have a very sparkly and wonderful personality and this deep mellifluous voice that you could just, keep talking, Roger, that sounds great. But in terms of the precedent that he set at the studio he ran, Concorde New Horizons, it definitely taught me a lot of things because, it was called colloquially Concorde School of Film or Roger Corman School of Film. And it really was. A lot of people got their starts there. They weren't always Concorde because he had New World and some other things, but he gave starts to people like, Ron Howard got his first directing opportunity. Dennis Hopper worked for him, Gail Ann Hurd, Jim Cameron. I mean, they're all way before me, of course, but they're in that realm of Roger Corman. And there wasn't a lot of money. He has this book that's titled How I Made, 200 movies. I forget the number. 200 movies and never lost a dime. He would do things like, get Martin Sheen, and he'd be on the cover of the video box, and then you realize what actually happened is that Roger paid him for one day, and they shot little scenes that they cut in through the movie. That's smart. People buy a movie because Martin Sheen's on the cover. Well, there you go. So I learned things like that. I remember that, and this wasn't me, this was my friend who worked in marketing. They would send him out with a clipboard into malls, and they would just have these titles of non-existent films. And he would ask people, which movie would you go see? Which is interesting because that's how Sharknado originated. They had the title, they didn't even have the script. And I know the fellow who wrote that, and he said when they decided to make it, they conceived it as a straightforward, serious movie. And he said, no, this is something we've got to have fun with. And somehow he got them to trust him, and it became what it became. But, again, things like that, things like, what really sells a movie? Is it the fact that I take great pictures or this person does great acting? I mean, I think that's what brings a movie home, but what gets the butt in the seat is the title or the fact that Martin Sheen's in it. From a practical point of view, I remember meeting the producer at the studio on my first job, and he took me into his office and he said, Brad, every day you can pick one scene to make look really good. Beyond that, just make your day. And, being a very proud artist, I'm like, okay, I've got to game the system. How do I make them all look really good? And so I was coloring outside the lines. I mean, what's the, what can I do, that's outside of the normal parameters? And one of the things I came up with was that I would show up to set every day an hour or two early. And I would do diagrams. I would go and I would be in the set without blocking or anything, but I have a sense, of what it was. I probably had gone with the director and talked through it. I don't remember that, but I probably did. But anyway, I went in there and I would place some lights. On my diagram, I would be like, this is the lighting scheme in here, and that's the lighting scheme in there. And I would go through all the sets because they were, it was sets on a soundstage. And then when the crew would get there, I would walk them through the sets, and the first set we would get it lit. And then after that, if I didn't have time, I would just hand them the diagram. I'd say, here, go set this up. So I wasn't micromanaging them, and I would have them light 2 and 3 sets ahead. Now, the limitation with that is you have to have the equipment, but this was a studio. The equipment was laying around. And this is something that I've always incorporated. Anytime that I am able to, I sell that to people as I will move faster if you give me the equipment to pre-light, so I'm not going into a room and starting at square one, that you're walking in and it's roughed in, we just have to tweak and shoot. So, that was one of the advantages. And part of that reason was because literally to my astonishment, when we were shooting, I would walk into the bathroom and I would no sooner have stopped and gotten ready to do my business than the door would open and a PA would be saying, we want you on set. I just had no time. So how do you hedge that bet? And that was, one of the things I did. Another thing that I did, because we often didn't have the thing we needed, You have to think out of the box. How can I do this differently? If I don't have dolly track, if I don't have that light, if I don't have the cucaloras, if I don't have the thing I need to do the thing, how do I make it work? So it got me thinking really creatively, and sometimes you completely reconceive a shot, you know, and sometimes that challenge makes that shot even better, you know, and so that's just, you know, that's just really a revelation, but also it got me into the habit of where, you know, if I needed something to break up light and I didn't have it, you know, or whatever I needed, I would just go walk around the studio, which was an old lumber yard, and I would look in trash cans and in corners, and I would find these little treasures. I'm like, I can use this. And it's funny because years later, I was working on Torque for Warner Brothers, which is a $55 million action movie. I was shooting second unit. And I had Martin Henderson was the lead actor, and I had a scene with him, and the light was too clean on his face. I wanted to break it up. And I had these, you know, really experienced veteran grips, and I had this huge 10-ton grip truck outside, and they're like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I'm like, no, none of those things are right. And so I walked around. I would just walk around, and I found this old raggedy plastic C-47 bag, you know, clothespin bag. And I was looking, I was like, you know what this is? And I walked up, and we had a Lico on his face, and I put it in there. It was just perfect, you know, very subtle, but it took the edge off the light. And I'm like, this is it. And these guys are looking at me like I'm crazy. And, you know, they bring a C-stand and they clamp it. And they thought it was so funny. They found a spare Pelican case, and they called it the XZ47 or whatever. And that was on the truck. But you know, it's easy to take the thing off the shelf and to use it. You know, I mean, anybody can do that. But I really am very happy that I got pushed into that position of learning to MacGyver, learning to appropriate, you know, what was handy. I was on a shoot just the other day, and we were shooting an interview with somebody, and in the background there was this white pole. And, you know, everybody's freaking out. We don't want to see it. Can you go with a different angle? And, you know, there was angles which showed sliding glass doors, or the light was bad on the actor's face. And I just took some 2-inch black gaff tape and literally just put it on the face of the pole towards the camera. Another one of my favorite stories is I did this video with Rob Thomas called Lonely No More. And there was a scene with him in close-up, and he's got these shiny glasses on, and I wanted a reflection in the glasses. And we did not have because they're convex, you know, they show a pretty, you know, wide degree of range. I didn't have anything wide enough that you didn't see the end of it. And in a moment, I said, you know what? Get me a roll of paper towels and a C-stand. And I took that roll of paper towels, I put it on the C-stand, I just went whoosh. I raised the C-stand up, and if you see that video, if you go to my website, and you'll see the thumbnail for it, it has this white line. It's paper towels. So I could give you so many more examples of that, but those are the kind of things, you know, when you don't have the stuff, when you don't have the thing, when you're shooting low budget, you know, when you're challenged, when you don't have the time, you know, don't think of it as a handicap. Embrace it as a challenge, because really it will make you a better filmmaker. And sometimes, maybe more often than not, what you come up with will be even better than if you'd had the thing to pull off the shelf.
And when you do have free time, do you go to swap meets or thrift stores and look for things where because it sounds like you just have this keen eye for, like, intuitively you know what's going to work.
I don't. I mean, for me, it's an in the moment kind of thing. I mean, if I saw something like, you know, every once in a while I've bought, you know, little lights and little tchotchkes, but I don't go looking for it. I do try to balance my time, you know, and not be in work mode all the time. Although I am a little bit of a workaholic when it comes to, you know, both networking and also mentoring. I probably push myself a little more than I ought to. I've got to, you know, find that balance again with personal time. But yeah, it's I've had a few dreams in my life where, you know, I would wait, you know, I would be dreaming that I was on a set and a light was broken or missing, and I would just get so worried about, you know, how do we fix it and and then I wake up and I'm like, I have to have this conversation with myself that it was a dream because I'm so upset and so involved, you know, or those dreams where you dream that you're on set and then you wake up and it's time to go to set. You know, it's, so I try and not be on the clock 24/7.